Gotta
This is Gotham City.
go bathroom.
That's right. This is Jubilee Street, and today
Welcome, everybody.
we are in the city of Gotham. We're doing a little bonus episode. We figured we both saw the new Batman movie. We figured we were going to talk about it. Either way, why not record it and throw it up for you guys? So that's what we're going to do is talk about the Batman 2022, directed by Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson,
If you're not here,
Zoe Kravitz,
if you're here
Colin
and you
Farrell.
wanted Nick Cave, Colin
Paul Dano.
Farrell, Paul Dano.
So that's all I need for an intro. Let's get into it, Jake.
You got it. Sorry.
COVID-19 doesn't move
I'm
fast.
trying to queue up.
That lady's right.
That's right. If you're hearing rain and thunder, you've entered Gotham City. Ian, let's just jump into it. What'd you think of the movie?
I loved it. I thought it was incredible. I thought it was one of the best superhero movies I've ever seen. End of the episode.
I don't like starting with these kinds of questions this early in the podcast because it threatens to derail us. But I thought about this all day, and I think it's worth getting this out of the way because I'm going to sound like a hater to anybody that stands the Marvel movies. So I wanted to ask you if superhero movies and franchises and bullshit are going to continue to be a thing. It's kind of a two question thing. Would you prefer that you no longer get any more Spider-Man, Iron Man, Hulk, like Marvel, Captain Marvel stuff, but you would get as many of these Pattinson Batman movies forever? So, they just keep making these. They're still just as good.
Okay.
They're, would you prefer to get that or continue to get, stuff from Marvel?
And what's the second part of the question?
That's the second part. It's either you
what's the
continue
first
to
part?
get the first. Damn it.
You chose a two-part question.
Okay, the second part is Marvel loses all their licenses, so they can only make movies about one character. Which character would you choose for Marvel to make movies about? Same release schedule. They would have to continue to make movies on their current schedule, but it's only about they can only feature one character predominantly.
Well, that question's easy. That's Spider-Man. And to answer the first question,
Mhm.
I was thinking, I guess along a similar vein to you, I would take Marvel, but it's because it's just the differences in our personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if I find a writer I like, let's say, I'm content with only reading
Murakami.
stuff by that writer for 6 months and just reading all their books.
Yeah.
You crave variety a lot more than I do.
Mm-hmm.
If you might hear a band you love and they have 7 albums, but you'll only listen to one of them because there's so much other stuff you want to listen to. It's just a difference in how we're wired. So the Marvel movies are all kind of the same flavor, but it's a flavor I really like, and I'm fine with eating that flavor forever. Whereas I think you even though a lot of the DC movies might be bad, you like the differences in tone.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to react to the question about Spider. You said you would pick Spider-Man if they could only make a movie about one character. The real answer should be Moon Knight, because then, by way of Moon Knight's comic book history and the way that the character is, you could just put the Marvel universe inside Moon Knight's psyche, and then
multiple personalities.
And then you could just continue to make those movies under the guise of Moon Knight.
True.
And then, yeah, obviously I would probably just pick to continue to get a series of anthology Batman movies. Wouldn't have to be Pattinson, but if they have the tone and level, high level of just across the board movie making. So first thing that I noticed is that have you seen Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown and movies from that kind of earlier, at least in our with how old we are. So in Rosemary's Baby, there's this recurring theme that happens where, and they have theme songs, and I feel like movies these days don't really have theme songs. They have soundtracks, but they don't have a theme song. And at first, when you hear Something in the Way cue up, it's like kind of cringy because it's like, because there's just something about Nirvana, because they're so, I don't know if I'm saying this word right, eponymous, or
Mediocre.
they're not mediocre. They're a good band. I mean, you and I both love In Utero, and um, I don't think
Love's a
that
strong word.
Nevermind is like a bad record. I just think it's a little bit boring sometimes. So the fact that they chose Something in the Way as their theme song was really interesting. And the fact that it worked as well as it did, like, I didn't really like it that much until, and should we go ahead and say that this is a spoiler episode?
If
We're
we
just
want
going to
to,
talk.
I feel like if you're listening to this and you think it's not, you're an idiot.
This is where spoilers start. So if you don't want to listen to that, just come back and go see the movie, and then we'll have this like 2-hour episode or whatever that you can listen to after you watch a 3-hour movie. So there's a scene when they go into the Batcave, which the Batcave is just perfect in this movie, and it's a perfect transition because he's on his motorbike. You see him go into the Batcave. You see like all the various tunnel systems that he goes through, and you see as he's like turning the knob, the music that was sort of backing the last couple of minutes of scenes, he turns off the Nirvana soundtrack. So it's actually as if the Batman is like listening to music while he's going out and fighting
Nirvana.
people, which that's why I enjoyed this movie so much, because the thing is that Batman Begins is, and this will be something we go on with later in the episode, but Batman Begins will always be the best Batman movie to me because it's the movie that, to me, made me fall in love with the character. So it's always going to have like I was obsessed with that movie when it came out. I remember for weeks after I saw it, like it was all I would talk about with my parents. Like I'd just be like, "Oh, I love Batman so much." Like I would just literally go around the house being like, "Man, I love Batman." And I'm still like that about certain stuff. Like I got obsessed with this like Beatles song this week, "The Long and Winding Road," and I was just talking about how much like I love that song and how it made me think Paul McCartney was like a really good songwriter. Anyway, I'm rambling.
From the beginning, within like like sometimes you just know you're in good hands. From like the first 5 minutes, I was like, I'm gonna love this movie. I could just instantly feel it. I was like, oh, these people are speaking my language. I can just tell.
Mm-hmm.
The way it opened with the like homage to Halloween, with you're seeing through the mask and you hear the breathing.
Mm-hmm.
That was so unexpected to me for what we're used to seeing from Batman movies.
Mm-hmm.
But if you read Batman comics, you're like, oh, starting off with a horror homage, like, tracks perfectly. And I was like, oh, shit, like, they get it. So it made me wonder, and you can't exactly answer this question either because we have grown up with comics, but I was wondering, like, if you've never read a comic book or a Batman comic book in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and you're our age, let's say you're 30 years old, I wonder what you think of Batman, like, what you think of the character. Because it'd be way different than what we think of.
Well, that was like the best part of the movie, right? Is they made it pretty clear that Batman's like creepy.
That's what I'm getting at. This was like,
yeah.
If you read Batman comics, this movie feels like home. It feels like
yeah, it did.
What you know. But I was wondering, like, if you aren't familiar with that tone for Batman, I wonder what you thought about this movie.
You know what's wild to think about too is that this was originally going to be a movie that starred Ben Affleck.
Oh, was it really?
Mm-hmm. Because the Batman has been planned since Batman vs. Superman came out, and I believe that Matt Reeves was connected to it, and I think at one point Ben Affleck was going to write and direct it.
Yeah, who knows what that would have been like. I was thinking, like, I feel like if Ben Affleck had never played Batman and the last Batman movie at all was 10 years ago, the last Christian Bale one, I feel like people weren't as excited for this movie as you would think.
Well, yeah, because fucking Zack Snyder like ruined Batman in those movies.
Yeah, and
It's
even
not
though
his
we
fault.
haven't had a Batman solo movie in
Hmm.
almost 10 years, it doesn't feel like it because
Yeah,
of all the Ben Affleck stuff. I feel like if that never happened, this movie would have had a lot more hype.
yeah. I
Because I
really
wasn't that
liked.
excited for it. Like, I knew I was going to see it, and I saw it opening day, but I wasn't
Mhm.
like, don't shit on me, Jake. I wasn't as excited as I get for a Marvel movie.
Well, you know me, man. I was, you know how much I like Robert Pattinson's work in the last like 5 years. Like
Love
this
Robert
was a
Pattinson.
no brainer for me. Um, and I also took deliberate measures to not. I think I watched one trailer, and as soon as I watched the trailer, I'm like, "Yep, I'm in. I'll watch this." I
Yeah, I was
knew
the
I was
same
going to
way.
go see it.
If I see like the first trailer and I'm in, I don't want to see anything else.
Yeah, and so like when like I didn't know until like 2 days or a day before I saw the movie that Colin Farrell was in it, and then it was in the Hot Ones interview he did, and I was like, oh my fucking god, Colin Farrell's playing the Penguin. Like I was even more in because I was like, finally Colin Farrell can like play a ridiculous comic book character right. Like he didn't get to do a good Bullseye, so now he can do his version of Oswald Cobblepot. Which
What did you think
if there
about it?
were if there were one part of the movie that I both loved and kind of bothered me, it was him. Uh, I think he nailed like how Cobblepot would be. Um, but I'm really, really excited to see if maybe they lean into the weirdness of his character because there's little references like the bar's called the Iceberg, um, you
Lounge.
know, Iceberg Lounge. Like there's little things like that, but there was no penguin iconography. Like there was no like animals, like birds or anything. He didn't do anything gross. He just looks kind of gross, but that's already kind of how he looked. He looks a lot like more akin to. It's just funny to say, but it makes sense because Matt Reeves drew influence from the animated series, the Batman the animated series, and he looks a lot more kind of like a cartoon. He doesn't like. I think the best Penguin is probably always going to be Danny DeVito in Batman Returns. Like
I mean,
there, you can't get better than that. The cat. I mean, he is
when he fucking
literally built for that role.
biting people's faces, like he's so scary.
Mm-hmm. And
And
I
and then he dies, and the penguins like push him off into the water. It's
that it,
so
it's
weird.
perfect. It's perfect. That's how the character should be remembered. I don't think that Colin Farrell's going to go for that. I think that our new Penguin, I accept it. I'm just like he might have some weird quirks. He might
Hmm.
eat like he might. There might be a scene where he just eats like a raw fish or something like that. Like he just plucks a fish out of the water and eats it or something. I'm not getting my hopes up for that kind of thing. But given Colin Farrell's recent, somewhat upsetting, and I only mean like content wise upsetting and disturbing filmography of the last 10 years, I think that we're in for a treat for what he could do in that solo series. So I'm
Yeah,
really excited about that.
I thought he was really great. I mean, I prefer the Danny DeVito style, like
Yeah.
character, but I really like what they're doing. So this whole movie was about making Gotham like feel lived in, like it felt like
Gotham was finally a
so.
character. They finally got it. Gotham is the main character of Batman comic books. If you don't do that, you didn't make a Batman movie. And none of the other movies, except for the Burton movies, got that right.
It feels like so much is going on off screen at all times, and I like the idea of, I guess they're going to do a TV show and future movies of the Penguin kind of being, and the Iceberg Lounge kind of being like central to the Penguin's like the go-between man who connects the crazy villains with the kind of crime families. He's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like the middle guy, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a
Well,
really
that's
cool way to
another
go.
thing the movie got incredibly right about Batman is Batman isn't a cop, he's a vigilante. So he doesn't really fuck with any of these people, but he knows where he can find Oswald Cobblepot, and he knows that Cobblepot knows about these other criminals that he's tracking down. And that I loved in the movie that it was only within it's a long movie, a little too long, but I never wasn't enjoying it. I enjoyed all of it. And I think it's a testament to how good of a job Matt Reeves and the team did with everything. Set design, costume design. I loved Wayne Manor. I loved that Wayne Manor was in a high-rise penthouse. I loved
In the
that.
city.
And in the city, I loved that. I loved the bat, the bat cave. I loved all that shit. I thought that was. I loved every single choice they made in this movie was perfect to me. I don't think that there were any bad choices. It just could have been shorter. Anyway, I'm gonna ramble a lot in this episode. Listeners, just be prepared for that. Yeah, but no, I think this isn't my favorite version of the Penguin, but I think that it is a perfect character to include in your movie. And I saw some reviews that said like that there were like quote unquote too many villains or something in this movie. But the main villain's the Riddler, and then like Falcone and all those guys, they're just part. That's just like back. That's just story building for Selena Kyle and Batman. I never felt like any plot line was too like focused on or not focused on enough. Like I felt like everybody got the spotlight just enough.
Yeah, I feel like this might just come from us having like so much of a comic book background, but it only felt like there was one villain to me, like the Riddler. It felt like everyone else was there to bring the plot forward, and some of the characters are morally good, some are morally bad, but the Riddler is like the villain and really the only villain.
Yeah.
My preferred version of Batman is a little silly, a little on the campy side.
Mm-hmm.
I rewatched the Joel Schumacher movies over the past week, and I mean they're bad. They're not good movies, but the tone and the way Gotham feels in those movies to me, like that's what I
fucking love the Batmobiles in those movies.
That's what I gravitate towards, is that kind of ridiculousness. But I think if you're going to go this dark route, this movie did it right. I was never. Those Christopher Nolan movies are very well made, very good, but there's like a realism to them that I can't fully get on board with, because if you're making Batman seem realistic, to me it makes Batman unlikable. Because if I think about Batman existing in the real world, I wouldn't like him. If Batman was real, I wouldn't like him. So I think you kind of have to, if you're going dark, it can't be realistic. So I like that this movie felt fantastical. It didn't feel like the real world. It felt like Gotham City. Gotham City didn't feel like Chicago like it did in the Nolan trilogies. It felt like a fictional city. This felt like a fictional world where it's dark and I can still sympathize with Batman. I thought that was really well done.
So I'm sure there's a lot of Batman comics pre 1980s that are considered like canon Batman. I have not read a lot of those. That's what I'm saying. I can't make that call. My Batman is Grant Morrison's Batman. Frank Miller, Scott Snyder, those are the Batmans that I grew up with, and that made me really love the character. And so I feel like
talk about that. Talk about where you fell in love with Batman.
Well, I mentioned earlier, my love of comics started with Spider-Man. Whenever this first Spider-Man movie came out, I had like a Wolverine toy and like a Mr. Fantastic, like Stretch Armstrong doll. But I never I watched the Spider-Man cartoons and stuff growing up, but it wasn't until I saw Spider-Man that I got into comics. And then I think Batman, I want to say it came, so Batman Begins came out in 2005, and then I was obsessed with it. And for Christmas later that year, God, was it that year? I can't remember timeline-wise. Basically, there was one Christmas where I got a bunch of Batman graphic novels, and I remember being very surprised about it because I didn't really have a lot of graphic novels, And I got The Dark Knight Returns, Black Mirror by Scott Snyder, and then I think Jock and Francavilla. Francisco, yeah, thank you. And the moment that I knew I was hooked to this character was in The Dark Knight Returns, when he's in the funhouse with Joker after Joker's killed like 13 or 14 Boy Scouts or something crazy like that. Um, Something in hindsight that's so ridiculously like pinpointed by Frank Miller in his writing that it's comical. And Batman's like got his hands around Joker and he's gonna kill him. You think he's gonna kill him, and I remember feeling like this like euphoria come over me, and I was like, this is like a there's something about this that deeply resonates with me. And then the fact that Joker cracked his own neck because at that point Batman has like had like broken Joker's spine. It was at that moment where I knew that this was something like special. And then of course all the other cool stuff that happens in that book, like the ridiculous blackout that happens, and then he recruits the mutants. Um, and then of course like Superman basically eating an atomic bomb to save Gotham. Like there's I mean everything about that graphic, like the little screens where they do like I I mean again, your questions are great, Ian. You're just asking for me to go on these little tangents about every little aspect I love about Batman comics. But around that time for me, I'd say between like 2005 to 2008, because by the time The Dark Knight came out after Batman Begins, I remember having this visceral moment in the theater the first time I saw it. And I saw it with my dad and my brother, I think, because I think we had to like scrunch into the middle of a bunch of seats. Like it was a packed theater. And I remember seeing in the beginning of Dark Knight Returns, there's like a scene in a parking garage. And it's when they talk about all these Batman lookalikes showing up and pretending to be Batman. And one of them has a gun. And I remember saying out loud, I'm like, Batman doesn't use guns. And then, of course, and I was like pissed off about it, which in hindsight was really cute to me, because it's like, it was really meaningful to me that there was a superhero that didn't have to use guns to like make himself more scary or powerful. So that's sort of the long answer. What about you?
I guess through you, really. I liked Batman when I was a really little kid. I know I was Batman for Halloween when I was like 3, and
Iconic picture.
I remember watching the Burton movies and the Schumacher movies as a little kid. But I was always into Marvel,
Mm-hmm.
and Spider-Man and the X-Men and those cartoons growing up. I'm sure I watched the Batman animated series a little, but it wasn't my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just never really. I was such a Marvel kid. I didn't watch the Nolan movies. I watched the third one in theaters. I didn't watch the first two when they
Yeah.
came out. And then when I was like 20 and we lived together, you had all those Batman graphic novels you just mentioned. And, we would just talk about comics, and I'm sure you were like, you need to read these. And I just remember going through them and reading Dark Knight Returns and Arkham
Mm-hmm.
Asylum and Year One and all the shit you had that I don't know if I'd ever read a Batman comic before. Maybe Hush. I think my dad bought Hush when it came out. But, it was like a whole new character for me, new world. And I just loved all that shit. And then I played the Arkham Asylum video game. I probably watched
Great game.
the Dark Knight movie with you because I'd never seen the Heath Ledger thing. So yeah, it wasn't until I was an adult. I didn't grow up with Batman really.
Yeah, I think that was a really fun time for us to be friends, because you knew so much about X-Men, and I remember you got me into Marvel Comics. And I had a brief period of time where I was like obsessed with Captain America during that time period. And then when I got back into collecting single issues around like 2012, we would go to Roll the Die. And that's when you got me into Snyder Batman. And then once I guess it was probably a couple years after that, we started working at The Great Escape. And then I think I have like a full collection of the Snyder Batman run, except for all the like sub copies of some of the Batman crossovers with like the Clayface and all the sub covers and stuff like that. Yeah, I think in hindsight, Batman was like, it was always Spider-Man and Batman for me. Those were always the characters that I think were always important to me. But anyway, let's get back to the movie.
Well, on the comic tip, like what, this seemed to be a movie tailor made for comic book fans.
Mhm.
What specific runs did you notice in it? I saw a lot of Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale in it, like Long Halloween,
Mm-hmm.
and then Hush, just with the whole like serial killer mystery aspect. What about you?
Yeah.
Were there any like specific?
Well, there's a specific reference to Hush, I think. Like, I think it pretty clearly, like, there's, like, the word Hush is spelled out somewhere.
Yeah, right after they bring up the last name's Elliot, Hutch's last name. They bring up his dad.
Thomas Elliot. Yeah, Thomas Elliot.
The dad of Thomas Elliot's on the news, and then you
Which
see Hush written on the wall.
leads me to believe that I think that if Matt Reeves makes a sequel to this, Hush will probably be the next character because there hasn't been an on-screen version of Hush. I personally think if Matt Reeves were going to go in the direction that I believe these films should go in, I think that we should introduce the Black Skull, or what's his name, Black Mask?
The Black Mask, the guy who like sells
Whatever the fuck, whatever the fucking guy that works at like the Bureau of like Magic in the DC universe. I feel like it would be awesome to see like a little bit more of the like Justice League Dark stuff kind of seep into this, because I think Matt Reeves could do it in a way that like was believable. Anyway, comic book tip, definitely year one, when Batman,
with the narration.
Yeah, year one, when Batman jumped. My favorite scene of the movie, which feels like an homage to the 90s movie, or the Tim Burton movie, is when he jumps off the building and they have that camera that's like looks like it's attached to Pattinson as he jumps off the building. And I'm sure all of that is like, there's a lot of it that's just CGI, but it looks very old school. Like the way they shot it, it looks very old. Like not like how I feel like most people would do a Batman like flight suit scene. And then when he finally gets down near to the ground and has to fly his chute, he gets caught on a subway. And I was probably the only person who laughed in the theater when that happened. But for me, it was like out of a complete, like, I heard somebody in a YouTube video I was watching with Haley the other day talk about how you sometimes see things on screen that you don't know how to react to, and the only way that you can react to them is by laughing. And I feel like that's like how I am with all kinds of like art that I interact with, like, because I like to be surprised. And
I had that moment multiple times in movies where you're just like, those motherfuckers pulled this off. Like, how'd they do it?
And they just, again, like I said earlier, every choice was right. And so that scene was really important. That was very year one. The ending was like 0 year from Snyder's run. In fact, I think to a T it was 0 year, because in that run, Riddler is the main villain, and basically Gotham goes prehistoric. Like, there's like Batman's using a grappling hook, and he's got a little scooter. And I'll be honest, like, I loved that. Like, I loved that they chose to destroy Gotham. Those are always the best Batman stories to me. Like, the blackout in Dark Knight Returns, like, when the entire city is impacted, like, Riddler did that. Like, Riddler destroyed the infrastructure of the city. Like, there has been nothing like that done in the, like, I don't even count the whole Bane city takeover in Dark Knight Returns on the same level. Like, the way they did this it was scary. Like, I was like, oh my God, people are getting electrocuted right now. Like, people are getting, like, so many people are dying off camera right now.
They did a good job of making it feel like it had stakes, which a lot of times these movies lack. There was also shades of the 90s No Man's Land comic book story where
I need to read that. That's a blind spot for me.
There's a series of earthquakes, and Gotham basically becomes closed off to the rest of the country, and different villains take over different parts of the city. It's a similar thing to the end of this movie, like a catastrophe, and Gotham's fucked.
Yeah, and I also, I have to, another one of my favorite scenes that, obviously Gotham Central is all over this movie, and I think that whoever the casting director was of this movie, I've got the, like, notes up here.
Perfectly cast.
Every single one of the casting decisions was incredible. They hired that one cop who has that, like, hey, what do you think you're doing here, Batman? Like, that guy was amazing. I mean, I could go on and on about that. I wanted to tell you too that I think a lot of people would argue with me on this, but the color palette of this movie was very much of Tim Burton's era. Like, I actually found this to be a pretty colorful Batman movie, and
I think
it's
it was the
not
darkest
all,
movie I've ever seen.
and it wasn't all set at night. A lot of it was set at night and in the dark, but um, I got a lot of like flashes of like the colors and maybe the lack thereof in the Tim Burton movies. And this was a really small, really important choice that they've never done with a Batman, but the eye makeup was incredible. Like, that's probably something that's always been a thing with Batman, and this is the first. Like, I saw a scene breakdown from Batman Returns where you see Keaton with the helmet on, and he has eye makeup on, and then they pan away to Catwoman, and then there's another scene where he takes his helmet off, and the eye makeup's not there anymore.
Yeah, I think they all wore it just because
Yeah.
it looks cooler when you have the mask on. Like, it just looks more like a comic book if you have the eye makeup under, it just looks more badass.
Mhm.
So I like that, yeah, they were just like, we're not going to pretend like he's not doing it.
Yeah, so all those like little choices I think lent themselves to like like there were so many connections to the comics and like the way that Batman feels, and then the last scene that I felt really captured that sort of like creeper quality that Batman has. Like, Batman is a very creepy person. There is no one probably creepier in the universe. Like, Batman is funny because of the fact that he is so creepy. And there's a really great scene where he's like figuring out Selina Kyle, and he's followed her back to her house, and he's watching her undress, and then she puts on the Catwoman costume, and it's not even really like what we usually think of with Catwoman. Like, she's not like her, Selina in this movie is like a troubled person, but mostly she just, is a cat burglar. And I think that was also really remained true to the way that Selina and Bruce interact with each other in the comics. And I just have to say, Zoe Kravitz is amazing in this role.
Do you think she's the best Catwoman?
It's hard to say. It's kind of like comparing Colin Farrell to Danny DeVito, I think. Like, I think that she's the best Catwoman we've gotten of the modern Batman movies, but I think that Michelle Pfeiffer's role is completely iconic, and I don't think she could ever be dethroned. I don't.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
I don't think that Selina Kyle has ever been that crazy.
It's a tough one for me because
it's a tough one for me.
Okay, Michelle Pfeiffer and Zoe Kravitz are definitely 1 and 2. Halle Berry's a distant third.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like sex appeal,
Eartha Kitt's
I think
pretty great too.
Wait. Which one is Eartha Kitt in the 60s?
Adam West.
Oh man, nice. Yeah,
and then there's
Eartha Kitt and I hooked up in an airplane bathroom once.
So Eartha Kitt plays Catwoman in the back half of the show. Someone else plays Catwoman in the first half. But yeah, for me, like, you can't really divorce the sex appeal from Catwoman. It's like that's a big part of the character.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, do you pick Michelle Pfeiffer in one of the sexiest roles ever in cinema, maybe? Or do I pick Zoe Kravitz, the daughter?
I listened to the Ringer episode about the Batman before we recorded this, and they talk a lot about how ridiculous Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman is because she basically gets electrocuted, and then her cats bring her back to life, right?
Yeah, straight up.
Like, it's laughably stupid, but
it's like an anime, like, just weird resurrection.
It's
scene.
really, really awesome, and I think that that Batman movie doesn't get enough credit for how like off the walls weird it is. This one's weird too, but it's grounded in a way that I think it is. Again, it is mind-boggling to me that in 2022 we got a superhero movie from DC, mind you, that was as good as this.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's amazing. So, as I was saying, when did you cut me off? Zoe Kravitz,
Mm-hmm.
the daughter of Lisa Bonet, the first woman I ever had a crush on.
Wow.
How do you choose?
Between Lisa Bonet and Zoe Kravitz?
No, and Michelle Pfeiffer, which
Oh.
was, before you cut me off, that's what I was saying, Jake Curtis. I would still probably take Michelle Pfeiffer, though. But they're both great.
I think Michelle Pfeiffer's performance is better. I mean,
I think
But
Zoe
they're
Kravitz
different.
is a better actress, but the Michelle Pfeiffer is just more iconic.
yeah. It's
And maybe in 20 years it won't be, but for right now.
No, I think they're two different. They're doing two different things, and I feel like I would feel unfair like comparing them, because again, it's a different kind of thing. But I think that Michelle Pfeiffer takes the trophy. I think Robert Pattinson is the best Batman that we've gotten. But
Now, let's get to that. That might be a longer discussion.
Okay.
Jeffrey Wright, best Jim Gordon, hands down, right?
I don't know, man. I like Gary Coleman.
Gary Oldman?
Gary Oldman, yeah. I mixed up.
Gary Coleman is different strokes.
Gary Oldman, yeah. I smoked too much
Gary
weed.
Oldman is, look, one of the best actors we have, but,
Mhm.
man, Jeffrey Wright felt like, and even though
He nailed it.
Jim Gordon is white in the comics and Jeffrey Wright's black, obviously, the movie's so dark, and when you
Mhm.
just see his profile, like, he looks straight up exactly like Jim Gordon in the comics. Like,
It made me think of.
oh, it was incredible.
Do you remember the story that Francavilla penned and inked and colored? I don't know if he colored it. I think he did. I think he does his own colors. It's in the Black Mirror, and it's the one where he finds out his brother is like insane or something.
His son, James Gordon Jr.
His son, yeah. And you see all these shots where you can't see his eyes, but you see the like purplish orange light hitting his glasses.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of like stuff that reminded me of that. Those like quintessential iconic like Gordon
For sure.
shots. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought, man, he was just like exactly how I picture him in my head.
Yeah.
And I've been on a Jeffrey Wright kick because I just watched that French Dispatch movie where he's basically playing James Baldwin, and he's great in that too.
Oh, that's awesome. I love Jeffrey Wright. I need to watch more of his stuff.
He's the Watcher in the MCU.
I don't need to watch more of his stuff. Let's talk about Alfred. What'd you think of Andy Serkis?
I mean, this isn't really like a movie with. He was fine, but he wasn't the best Alfred or anything. But he didn't have a lot to do.
So it's notable though that this is the least we get in any Batman movie. This is the least we get to see Bruce Wayne, right?
Well, let's get to Bruce. But what did you think about Alfred?
That's what I'm saying is I feel like I didn't really get to know him very much.
Yeah, it's hard to compare him to. I can't remember the first guy who played him. He played him in the Tim Burton movies and the Schumacher movies. That guy's great.
I still
And
think that Michael Caine is the best Alfred we've gotten, though. As far as, like, charm, I feel like you always think of charm with Alfred. And
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think almost everyone would agree that's the best Alfred.
But I think that this movie was very deliberate in how they chose to depict Bruce Wayne. And I think that, unfortunately, if you're playing Alfred, almost every scene is going to be with Bruce Wayne, unless you're making a Pennyworth side series or something,
Yeah, he just naturally wasn't going to have much to do.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So now, I want to talk about the Bruce Wayne thing, but let's round out the actors.
Mm-hmm.
So now Robert Pattinson, we get to him.
Okay.
What do you think of him?
I think this is how Bruce Wayne has always been. I never really cared about his playboy persona. I prefer that he plays more of a sort of tortured, awkward recluse. I think the only flaw in doing this character depiction is that, like, it's harder to believe that people wouldn't figure out he's Batman because he already looks so much like somebody who would be Batman in the movie, you know? But that being said, I think he embodied the role better than any actor has. I think that Michael Keaton is probably my second favorite, and then Christian Bale, and then I don't really care about the other ones. Adam West, in his own way, of course, is amazing, but you know, I haven't watched a lot of that old '60s Batman stuff.
I remember like going to like my dad's family on holidays, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Adam West Batman always being on. I guess maybe there was like a local channel that would show reruns on holidays or something. I remember always watching Batman 66 on like Christmas.
It sounds like
but anyway,
nice vibe.
Yeah, I think Pattinson is the best Batman. It's not even close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For me, like, it's really hard to act when you're wearing like that much of a costume. Like,
yeah.
And I feel like he was able. I mean, Robert Pattinson's just incredible. I could go on and on about. I think he's such a high level of an actor. The way he was able to act and emote while wearing this ridiculous costume was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
He I thought was the best actor to have played the part while having the hardest job because he's barely ever Bruce Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
I was floored.
Well,
I think Michael Keaton would be too. And then, man, rewatching those '90s movies, George Clooney is awful as Batman.
Horrible casting.
I've really liked Val Kilmer Batman.
Val Kilmer Batman's
really
fucking
good.
awesome.
He's really like leaning into the Adam West of it all. Like he knows it's campy. He's so silly. Whereas George Clooney, I feel like doesn't know why he's there. I was really impressed by Val Kilmer.
I love Val Kilmer in general. Like I really like him as Jim Morrison. So I think he deserves like a seat at the table of good Batmans for sure.
Underappreciated.
You didn't say anything, but I don't really include Ben Affleck because I don't really feel like Ben Affleck got to really do anything with the Bruce Wayne role that we didn't already know, you know, except for the Martha.
Yeah.
Martha.
Sadly, that's what it will be remembered for.
Yeah.
And Ben Affleck is a great actor. I like Ben Affleck a lot, but he just didn't get the material to do anything good with it.
He was a victim of bad timing, and he had a relapse during the shooting of the movie. I think by that point he was doomed to really leave the kind of mark he might have liked to leave on the character. And given his background and connection with Kevin Smith, I had a lot of hopes for Ben Affleck to make a Batman movie. I
did too.
I think he would have made a really cool Batman movie. So, especially because I would have at least hoped that he'd, tap Kevin Smith, and maybe Kevin could help him come up with the script. Because I still think that Kevin Smith, the fact that Kevin Smith has not been asked to make a superhero movie is another reason I don't fuck with Marvel. Let that guy make a Daredevil movie.
It is kind of ridiculous that, like, he's the reason a lot of that stuff is cool, is because of Clerks and Mallrats. And I feel like pop culture is kind of like...
They've forgotten him. They don't care about him.
Yeah, left Kevin Smith in the dust. Like, so much of what's cool now is cool because Kevin Smith started it all. Like, the way indie movies look now... I mean, this is a subject for another podcast, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like... I know Kevin Smith can be cringy sometimes or whatever, like, as a dude, but, like, that dude is so important to what is cool in mainstream now.
He made liking comic books cool.
And,
before Marvel made their movies.
And just the style of filmmaking, the way the way cinematography looks now, like, just so many things, like, go through his hands. But anyway... let's move on to a top 3 Batman movies.
Okay, cool. Can
I? How do you want to do this?
I just want to say.
You can do whatever you want, Jake.
I just want to say one last thing. Can we talk about the Riddler? We didn't talk about the Riddler.
Oh, we didn't talk about the Riddler.
Yeah, let's talk about the Riddler, and then we'll do our top 3.
Paul Dano, your favorite? Talk about it.
The best thing that Batman villains do is that they deflate you. Because they do all this fucked up stuff, and then the only payoff that you get is you get to see them in a padded room, and they're smug because they know they set all these bombs around the city, and that was the best the best payoff I've ever gotten from a Batman villain. Uh, of course, Heath Ledger like dangling from the building in The Dark Knight is really, really like one of my favorite movie shots ever, like for superhero movies and comic book movies. But the fact that like Paul Dano's like the Riddler is almost like his character is almost always seen through a camera, like it's almost like meta filmmaking because you know you get that amazing shot in the first part of the movie where he just sneaks into the house and Riddler's a weird character to write. He's not an easy character because he's essentially, what do they call Batman's rogues gallery? He's essentially just another one of the rogues gallery. But in this movie, he's really special because he kind of embodies this like QAnon character, right? That's like kind of the major comparison people are drawing with the Riddler. Also, The Ringer mentioned this is like Paul Dano's first blockbuster movie, and he's been acting for like 20 years, which is crazy.
There Will Be Blood wasn't a blockbuster?
I don't necessarily think in the scale of the Batman versus the Batman, like this is
Yeah, sure.
He's playing a big name, like this is a huge IP role that he got. The UI in this movie is insane.
Right,
so anyway, yeah, I mean I think that Jim Carrey's Riddler is great, and I love the costume design, and he looks like the comic book character, like he looks goofy. He looks like he could have stepped out of an episode of the animated series. But that being said, I think that this Riddler is unique, and I don't know about you, but I'm excited to see who else gets brought out of Arkham or Blackgate.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I thought Paul Dano was great. I think he's following in the veins of like Christopher Walken, where like I'm just scared of him. When he plays a scary character, I believe it. And Paul Dano can do comedy, but like that dude just has a way of like being terrifying, and they just let him basically play his There Will Be Blood character again, and he crushed it.
Yeah, he crushed it, and I really like that he the thing is he was never that scary because he's so goofy. And the choice, which they clearly it was a direct, deliberate choice to like have his character tape his glasses over his mask, was one of the most important choices they made in the movie because
it's because it's what I do as Ian McCurtis is I put the glasses on over the mask.
But it's also it shows that like this guy is just a like incel like crazy dude living in his apartment, and he didn't have a lot of money. He was just going to military supply stores and shit and like buying tactical gear. But he's like, well, I don't have any contacts, so I got to fucking put these glasses on over this mask. And it was another one of those things about how like Batman's not the only one learning the ropes. Like the villains are going to get better as he gets better.
Yeah, like what's cool about Batman and what makes him unique, I think in terms of superheroes and maybe even like fiction in general, is that like Spider-Man's always going to be kind of the same. He's going to joke around while he's fighting.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to try to go on a date with Mary Jane, and then some shit's going to go down. He's going to have to miss it. Like, it's always going to hit the same beats. And you can go down the line with that with every superhero.
Mm-hmm.
Batman is uniquely versatile in that he can be campy, he can be dark, he can be realistic, he can be fantastical, he can be almost mythological like Scott Snyder made him. Like,
yeah.
You can do anything with that character, and the same goes for most of the big villains. The Riddler can be Jim Carrey, or it can be Paul Dano. The Joker can be Cesar Romero, or it can be Heath Ledger. And it all seems just as true. And that's kind of the amazing thing about Batman is, like, no matter what weird take you do on Batman, it still feels like Batman. It doesn't feel like you're going in a wrong direction.
Well said. Yeah, well said. Nothing to add.
And I guess we'll close out on the top 3. I thought another thing they really got right with this movie is usually in superhero stories, especially the movies, especially the Marvel movies. I imagine this is a reason you don't like them. The villains always kind of have the same motive. In the Marvel movies, a lot of them worked for Tony Stark or they work for the government. They get wronged and then they hate the Avengers. Society wrongs them or the hero, Eddie Brock gets wronged by Spider-Man, he becomes Venom. Like, it's sort of the same thing over and over again. The hero wrongs them or society wrongs them.
Mm-hmm.
They lash out. Another thing that makes Batman unique that this movie understood is that in the comics, a lot of Batman's villains exist just because Batman exists. No other reason. Batman pops up and like, oh, there's a crazy guy like fucking beating up criminals. I'll dress up crazy too and do some shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like that doesn't really exist in any other hero.
Yeah. It's like it's one of those things. It's like you think that you're doing the right thing, but then as soon as you sort of step out of the shadows and you're playing this character, the stakes change because now there's going to be crazy people who are legitimately
Given agency.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another
And
interesting
that
facet of the character.
It feels like that seems less realistic
Mm-hmm.
as a story writing device,
Yeah.
but it feels more realistic. That feels to me like how the world works.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like Donald Trump became president, and then all these crazy people got agency to be public with their craziness.
Yep.
It feels like in the world, when something crazy happens, a bunch of random other crazy things follow.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because this was the first political Batman movie where it was like explicitly brought up that Bruce Wayne was like a privileged white boy, and he's kind of grappling with that throughout the movie. And I thought they dealt with that really well. And
I liked it was just one line. I liked that they
Yeah.
didn't beat you over the head with it like
exactly
they did in the Joker.
they didn't need to because you are like that's what I think this was a respectful movie to its audience in the way that I didn't believe Zack Snyder's movie where it was like, oh, we got to tell you everything again, and it's like I've read a million.
They let you figure it out on your own. Like this Bruce Wayne is kind of unlikable because he hasn't figured out the right way to use his money and his power.
Which if you
But they don't tell you that. They let you just figure it out on your own.
Which is, if you think about it, like this is Batman is ubiquitous. Like you can't throw a fucking rock without seeing Batman somewhere in America. Like he's a cultural icon. I mean, I would argue the Joker is probably bigger than Batman just because America loves terrorism, but yes, he is there. I forgot what I was trying to say. What did you just say before?
About how I forgot now, Jake. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, he's ubiquitous. He's just one of those characters that will like. Oh, even I mean, if you weren't, depending on where you grew up and all that kind of stuff, but like people know who Batman is. We don't need another origin story. So like, this movie is just as accessible to people who aren't comic book fans or haven't seen all the movies. Like, you know everything you need to know about Bruce Wayne. He's rich. He has way too much money. He fights criminals. He somehow can take gunshots. Like, he's just super powerful enough that, he just has all those little bits and pieces kind of locked in. If I can add one last thing about the movie before we go to our top three, I think we hit our hour mark pretty recently, if we're not already over it.
Not yet.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the movies, not the movie. God damn it. I'm sorry, I'm tired today. The music in the movie by composer Michael Giacchino. I felt like the music was incredible in this movie, and I feel like every musical choice fitted the mood. And like the Batmobile chase, which is one of my favorite parts of the movie, as soon as the chase gets off, what an incredible scene, by the way. That whole sequence is amazing.
One of the best car fight chase scenes.
Yeah, and like the Penguin thinking that he got away, and then Batman just happened to like ramp off the car perfectly, like, just
And then you see Batman walking like upside down
oh,
because the Penguin's upside down.
so
An
good.
incredible shot.
So good. I mean, this is a movie that just takes so many references from classical films. I think that's another reason I just feel like I went into this movie thinking it was made for me. And there's all these like the little musical flourishes where you kind of hear the old Batman soundtracks coming in. I think this is one of the
Hmm.
best soundtracks that the Batman franchise has seen. I know a lot of people like the Hans Zimmer stuff, and I
Well, it felt to me like they fixed the Joker, where like the Joker was like Scorsese worship, and
mhm.
this movie felt like, yeah, we're also pulling influence from Scorsese and all these classic movies, but we're gonna do it better, like way better.
Well, that's the thing, right? That's what makes that's again, that's why Batman and a lot of these DC characters honestly are all great for like I think that DC if they can just figure out like with Peacemaker, Suicide Squad, like I think if they can figure out that if they just give these comic book properties to smart filmmakers, they're going to be a
Let
big
them have their own vision.
they're going to have a more successful film franchise. Like, sorry, DC, you're not going to get to do the multiverse. Marvel does that. That's Marvel's thing. The reason that I dislike Marvel is the reason that they're successful. That's the reason most people like them because if you follow a formula, it's a whole lot easier to link together all these interlocking storylines. Whereas DC can't figure that out because they just keep, you know, letting people make their own movie and then expecting that you
Yeah,
can tie it all together. That's just not how it works. Like I
yeah.
also
If you can't consistently make a good movie, you might as well just take big swings. And it looks like that's what they're doing. I think that's a good philosophy. Just
exactly.
let directors do it their own way.
But that applies to DC's comics too. Like
Yeah.
the best DC comics are always one-offs or
So yeah, I kind of
miniseries,
feel like
you know?
they don't feel as yeah, yeah.
Like I'm not saying there's not great runs, but, it's different.
The writing, I mean, we barely went into the plot because it's so complicated, but I was blown away by like the script
Mhm.
and another thing that they just understood from the comics. We keep bringing up that point again and again. A normal superhero story. Let's take Spider-Man again. You have like a TV episode. You have your A plot, your B plot, usually a C plot. So usually your A plot's going to be like Spider-Man. Your B plot's going to be whatever Peter Parker is doing. Going to college, something for Aunt May, whatever.
Mhm.
And then the C plot is going to be following a side character. Like let's say you're following Mary Jane and she's trying to do something that's going to help Spider-Man.
Mhm.
So that's usually how every Marvel movie works. Most superhero stuff in general. What this Batman movie got right is the A plot is Batman. You don't even fucking worry about Bruce Wayne because he's not interesting. The B plot is Gotham. And then the C plot is a side character.
Mhm.
Like, they finally understood that. Like, don't even worry. Like, Bruce Wayne doesn't need to have a compelling story. He doesn't really matter. Just focus on Gotham instead. I thought that was so smart. I'm so glad they did it.
The only thing I wished more is that because they focus so much on making the city feel lived in, and I mean, the city that they created in that movie is just amazing. Like you can smell the mildew and the sewage and like the rain and like pizza and grease and like you know what Gotham looks and smells and tastes like. And I love that. I love that grittiness, that like the whole noir quality of it. Like it's a mystery movie. This is a who done it. This is a like detective movie. This is the most perfect movie ever made for Batman. And um they got that right. The only thing I wished more of is like I was like just straining my eyes looking in the background for some kind of like poster or like for the Grayson Family Circus or like shit like that where I could like like I just wanted to see more stuff like that, like more of the characters. But they do mention Bloodhaven. So like there are more like comings and goings. We can assume if there's a Bloodhaven that Clark Kent is flying around somewhere, learning, figuring out Superman and stuff like that. So I loved all that stuff. All that stuff made it feel tremendously lived in, but also just insular enough that like if the movie didn't want it, like if this was the last thing we get from this iteration of Batman, it's completed perfectly, you know?
All right, top 3 Batman movies.
So top 3, do you want to go, you want to just, I'll read my top 3 and then you'll read yours, or do you want to go one by one?
One by one. We'll go 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1.
Okay, so I haven't watched the Schumacher Batmans, but I don't really feel like any of those are that good to me, so I'm going to rule those out. I wish that in Batman vs Superman, which I think is like the first Snyder entry into the Batman Superman like DC stuff, I wish that there was more of the scene where he's fighting the parademons, and like it doesn't make any sense because the scene he's like using a machine gun, but I'm not going to choose that movie because that movie made me so angry. My number 3 choice is going to be Batman Returns.
Tim Burton, Danny DeVito, Michael Keaton, Michelle Pfeiffer.
Mm-hmm.
You got Billy D. Williams as
Billy D.
Harvey Dent,
Williams.
right?
Christopher Walken as
Christopher
Max
Walken is
something.
I don't know.
What about you? What's your number 3?
3. So I want to give a special shout out to. I said the Schumacher movies are bad.
Uh-huh.
They do have my favorite Gotham City.
Hmm.
The way it's like Art Deco from the animated series mixed with futurism.
Mm-hmm.
Gotham looks so fucking cool in those movies. I just wanted to shout that out. My number 3 is Mask of the Phantasm.
Oh wow, Master of the
Animated
Phantasm.
movie. Just fucking iconic. Like, I think we had the movie poster when I was a kid. The movie poster is just like etched in my brain.
Yeah, I can always picture that movie poster.
Just so cool that like that cartoon was so good that movie got a theatrical release. Like that was unheard of at the time, and I think up until this new movie, it was like the truest to the spirit of a Batman comic book. Love that movie.
It's wild to me that those are considered children's cartoons.
Yeah, it's a good ass movie. We just watched it again like a year ago, and still incredible.
Who'd you watch it with?
Me and Courtney.
Nice. I feel like my list isn't going to be that interesting because when I try to look at all the Batman movies that I've seen, I only really like a couple of them. So it's kind of a mix-up between Dark Knight Returns and Dark Knight. I actually really like Tom Hardy as Bane, and I think that Dark Knight Returns is a good movie.
Dark Knight Rises.
Oh, Dark Knight Rises. I'm so sorry. I really like that intro with like the plane scene in that movie, but I think I got to give my number 2 spot to The Dark Knight. I think it's I rewatched it last year and I think it drags a little bit, but I loved how creepy they made Two-Face. I feel like that's the creepiest. Like it's pretty scary to look at that character on screen. And then, you know, nothing else needs to be said about Heath Ledger. It's amazing to watch him act in that movie. He is everything that the Joker should be. Gross, scary, chaotic, violent, funny, just everything. Yeah, that's my number 2.
My number 2 is your number 3, Batman Returns. Maybe it'll be my number 1. You know, but there's a little recency bias with my number 1. I think it's obvious what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Batman Returns is just, you know, I loved it when I was a kid. It's just when I imagine Batman, I imagine that movie.
I hate to do this to the listeners, but I think I'm actually going to switch my number 2 choice with Batman Begins because I just think I like.
Yeah, you said earlier Batman Begins.
I think I
was
like
your
that
favorite Nolan
movie better,
and then I was like,
because
what are you doing now?
Well, I was thinking for whatever reason I was like I thought you were asking our top 3, not including the new Batman. So that was my line of thinking because Batman Begins was going to be my number 1. But
okay.
to me, I love the League of Assassins stuff so much in Batman Begins because again,
Scarecrow's cool.
I like what's that actor's name? The actor who plays Scarecrow's one of my faves. He's great. I always love when he shows up. He's in Red Right Hand, I think, or Peaky Blinders. Fuck, what was I gonna say? You were just talking about Batman Returns. Did you ever ride the Batman Returns ride at Six Flags?
In Louisville?
Yeah.
Kentucky Kingdom? The
It was like a water ride.
Oh, the Penguin water ride. Oh, fuck yeah.
That ride was so awesome. I remember
Yeah.
they had like the big creepy like rubber ducky. Remember that?
Yeah, dude. Oh, it's a great ride.
Yeah, it was a fun ride. And then they had all those promotional cups that you could get. That was like,
My family loves some promotional cups.
yeah,
when I was
well,
growing up.
you basically in every house you've ever lived in, it's been full of promotional cups. If it wasn't like NASCAR or wrestling cups, it was like U of L or superhero stuff. I mean, you're holding a promotional cup right now.
I am. Louisville Bats got it at a minor league baseball game last year.
Shout out minor league baseball. So we're on our number one pick. I think we can both agree here that the Batman has taken our all-time best Batman movie place. Favorite Batman, best storyline, great choice of and cast of characters. Best Gordon, second best Catwoman, Penguin up in the air. Uh, Riddler, best Riddler. I mean, the music score is fantastic. The costumes are great. The movie looks amazing. I mean, we didn't even talk about how beautiful some of the shots are in this movie. Like the whole sequence when he first goes into the Iceberg Lounge, and then the whole sequence where he breaks into Falcone's into the bottom floor of the Iceberg Lounge to go approach Falcone, and oh fuck me, we didn't even talk about John Turturro being Carmine Falcone. Like, holy fuck, that blew my mind. I didn't even know he was going to be in the movie. I was hyped. I love John Turturro. And then there's that whole fight scene where there's no lights. It's just Batman cut the power, and then he's like beating
So
people up.
fast.
And I mean,
It's amazing.
Pete Holmes said recently that he didn't like this Batman as much because Batman doesn't kick enough ass, but Batman kicks enough ass in this movie. And I just the thing that I think I like in movies like this now is when directors make the little choices that are so meaningful. And for me, everything I've mentioned thus far, and then when he gets blindsided by that sawed off and you think he's gonna fall, and then Catwoman pulls him up, and then I think he gets blindsided again and you think he's gonna die. And he as the goon is like choking out Catwoman, Batman gives himself like an adrenaline shot, and he just goes fucking berserk.
Possible Bane Easter egg there.
Very true. Good. I didn't make that connection, but yes, it could be some Venom or like a Venom prototype. And man, like that, I was just like, oh my, I started laughing as he's like beating. I'm like the only person in this theater. I'm just laughing at him beating the shit out of this goon. And I'm like, why am I laughing at this? I'm fucked up. But it's like, that's Batman. Like this is this crazy motherfucker. He just happens to have enough adrenaline pills on him to make him go from like, about to pass out or like bleed out. He can just like push through it. I mean, so much of the movie just like reminded me of like the Grant Morrison stuff. And like, I mean, yeah, I fuck with this movie hard. I love this movie.
Yeah, I went into it like I was like, if this is as good as the Nolan movies, then I'll be ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up obsessed with The Cure. Tim Burton holds a very high place in my heart. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
is someone who loves anything goth. So I didn't even think there was any way it would touch the Burton movies, and I think it surpassed them.
Ian, I have a lightning round question that I want to ask you.
Yeah.
You knew I was going to ask you about this. What did you think of what would have normally been an after credits scene where Riddler is throwing a temper tantrum in Blackgate, and we see and hear a kind of familiar voice that starts talking to Riddler?
I felt ambivalent about it. It was a cool little Easter egg. Another Joker movie doesn't excite me too much. It was a cool little Easter egg.
Do you think that was definitely like a DC executive that was like, well, we got to put Joker in there somewhere?
I absolutely do.
Yeah. That was the only whiff for me where I was like, I was like, I love Joker. I love him when he's done well, but he was ruined by that last movie. Did we really need to have him again? Like, how cool would it have been to hear like Solomon Grundy
No, dude, that'd be cool.
or like, that would be such a great thing for comic fans. Or like, even like you just see like two like slitted like yellow eyes. It's Killer Croc, or we hear someone who's like speaking like a thespian, and
Ooh, Clayface. Dude, that
little things
this
like
reminds
that.
me. The movie, whatever movie it is where Uma Thurman is Poison Ivy.
Oh my God, Poison Ivy would be amazing.
Bane is in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
You should look up if you don't remember the '90s Bane. It is wild.
Really, who plays him?
He's like, I'm not sure. He's like Uma Thurman's like lackey.
He's like a gimp,
and just
isn't
like,
he?
And just like he looks like Bane in the comics.
Yeah.
He just does whatever Poison Ivy tells him to do, and he wears like a big hat and like a trench coat to disguise himself. But he still has the Bane mask on at all times. It's so goofy.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that would be a great avenue for where the next movie could go, because if Batman or if Gotham is rebuilding, then that would be a good opportunity for Poison Ivy to like put something in the water.
I love Poison Ivy.
Yeah.
Get in with Thurman to do it again.
Yeah, and I mean there's tons of like side stuff that they could bring in, like but I definitely think that Penguin will definitely be a big part of this iteration of the Batman universe. And the, critic in me, the snob, wants to just be like, just let this movie be a one and done. But the kid in me is like,
we already know we're getting 2 shows.
Let me get more of this. Like, let me get one more movie with Pattinson as Batman. Just let me get one fucking more movie. And I don't care who the villain is. I don't care what the story is. Like, I don't care if it's like a story. The best Batman stories are when they do and try new things. And like, fuck, man. Like, Snyder really swung for the fences with that ridiculous arc about Gordon being in like a mechanized bat suit. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And then the Mr. Bloom stuff. Bruce Wayne, like, I think temporarily lost his memory. That was really weird. Like, I love when Batman gets weird. Everybody, Ian's cutting me off. I'm getting the proverbial cane to the neck. He's pulling me off stage. I love you all so much. Thanks for listening. If you did listen, follow us at Jubilee Street Pod on Instagram. You can email us at jubileestreetpod@gmail.com. And then on our Instagram page, there's a link in our bio that takes you to like our YouTube channel. We're putting a lot of audio on YouTube right now.
Robert Pattinson, we love you.
We will love you, Robert Pattinson. If you hear this, shout out to you for doing an after party at Pete Davidson's bar and playing Kanye West there.